Renowned composer and theorist R. Murray Schafer once said, "We have no earlids, we're condemned to listen, but our ears are not always open." If we think about that quote, it becomes clear that perception's really paramount to that.
Yeah, it brings to mind that famous cocktail party effect. You're in a crowded room with a lot of people, there's a lot of conversation going on around you, and then somebody in the room mentions your name, and you hear it. This is because your brain is actively seeking out information that is relevant and important to it. And your name, of course, is something that's very important to you. So your brain is able to seize on that piece of information and ignore everything else.
Yeah, so last video we talked about the scientific measurement of sound and various different attributes of the sound wave. But what becomes interesting with perception, is there are various gaps that we can actually explore.
Yeah, I like to think about that famous Zen question. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to listen, does it make a sound? Here you've got to distinguish between the acoustic nature of sound, which is a physical phenomenon, and the auditory nature of sound, which is what we hear. It's a psychological phenomenon. So we can confidently predict that when the tree falls, it will make a sound in the physical sense, an acoustic event. But if nobody's there to listen, then there's no sound in the auditory sense. There's nobody hearing it.
Yeah, and if we think about this concept of auditory sense versus acoustic, there are many different relationships that occur between those things. Some are logarithmic, some are exponential, but there's also these gaps that occur, and so it's not all necessarily straightforward.
It certainly isn't, and we've got to distinguish then between quantities and qualities. You can measure the physical attributes of sound as quantities and give them number values, but qualities are things that we experience, and they're not so easy to deal with because they really are internal, psychological things. So quality, quantity, we've got to try and work out what the relationship between these two things is, but actually never think of them as being the same thing because they're two fundamentally different aspects.
Yeah, we call this the field of psychoacoustics, really. And in our next video, we're going to unpack a little more about this idea of psychoacoustics and particularly pose the question, can our ears actually be trusted?
That's a very good question.